A very good evening to you, and we welcome you to an exclusive interview with Her Excellency Alaina Teplitz, the Ambassador of the United States of America to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. A very good evening to you, Your Excellency.
Sharifa, thanks for having me on the program tonight. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
It's a great privilege to have you with us in the studios. And Your Excellency, you commenced your tenure here in Sri Lanka 8 months ago. So tell us a bit about your experience here in our island.
This has been a very intense time, I think, for everybody here. But still, I've had the opportunity to travel around the island a bit, get to know people, get to know what the issues are, and of course enjoy some of the local food and culture. It's been a real pleasure.
We're glad you enjoyed it. And you joined the state sector, Your Excellency, or the State Department back in 1991. And so far you've received numerous awards. So tell us a little bit about your career, which kind of extends to almost 30 years.
That's right.
So tell us about your achievements and about your experience.
Yes, almost 30 years as a diplomat representing the United States abroad, and I have had the pleasure of serving in the region here several times. I was most recently the United States Ambassador in Nepal, and earlier in my career I served in Bangladesh and in Afghanistan. So I was very pleased and honored to be able to come back to South Asia and come to a country I did not yet know, Sri Lanka. So that has been exciting, and it's a great way to cap a long career.
And tell us a bit about your achievements, Your Excellency.
And so, well, you've noted I've been recognized with numerous awards, and this has been for contributions in helping manage and run our U.S. embassies abroad. And of course, we have many goals with those missions. We want to make sure to have strong relationships with our hosts. We also want to run our embassies efficiently. So I've always worked hard to do both those things.
So speaking on relations, let's touch on the bilateral relationships between the both countries. Sri Lanka and the U.S. has a 7-decade-long bilateral relationship. Right. So Your Excellency, can you briefly touch on some of the main highlights of the relationship between the two countries?
Well, I think 70 years says a lot. It is a testament to the strength of our relationship, which rests not just on our two governments, but on the people and the connectivity between our nations that's grown up during that time. I think the highlights of the relationship you can see today in the volume of trade between our countries. The United States is Sri Lanka's largest export destination. Also with the looking at our other relationships where we have interests around growing the economies of both of our countries and want to have investment. We look at common security interests as well and want to make sure that the Indian Ocean remains free and open to shipping, that the skies remain open to air travel so that we can continue to facilitate that trade, for example.
Which is certainly important as well.
Indeed.
And Your Excellency, the U.S. has supported us in many difficult situations, which includes the support rendered to us during the 30-year conflict as well. So right now, Sri Lanka is also facing a new security threat. So how does USA intend to support us?
Yes, and of course the terror attacks at the end of April on Easter Sunday were heartbreaking in their results. And in the wake of them, I think we, as fellow democracies, as countries that want to live in peace, we have to look at how we can collaborate together and with other partners to make sure we can disrupt future efforts at attack. This means sharing information. This means strengthening and building capabilities such as the ability to process evidence from crime scenes, for example, and to trace international terror networks or track their financing. These are the kind of things that we can work on together as well as with other partners. And the United States is committed to doing that with Sri Lanka and making sure that terrorism is not something that afflicts the people here or in any other country in the future.
Exactly. And Your Excellency, what is the status of the current economic relations between the two countries? And can you highlight about the bilateral trade as well?
Sure. As you know, we just concluded trade and investment framework talks. This is a conversation between our governments that happens periodically because we want to make sure we have a strong and growing trade relationship. So we look at barriers to that relationship and how we can overcome it. As noted earlier, the United States is the largest export destination for Sri Lankan products, largely garments. We'd like to see an expansion and diversification of that trade relationship, and I think there's a lot of potential in the tech sector. There's certainly a potential with agricultural products. I'd also like to see more American investment here in Sri Lanka. The growing tourism sector presents opportunities, I'm certain, and I think there's a lot of benefit from looking at how we can grow small and medium enterprises to engage in that trade. Right now, Sri Lanka benefits from GSP, and with GSP plus the duty-free access that all countries get for goods, there are over 7,000 goods that can enter the U.S. market from Sri Lanka duty-free.
I think that's a topic we need to touch on as well later on in the interview, Your Excellency. And U.S. is engaged in trade wars with many countries, and there are some accusations that the U.S. is currently harming the concept of global free trade. Now, this is according to a report I've come across in the BBC. It says that the US has threatened to impose tariffs on EU imports of Scottish whisky recently. So my question to you, Your Excellency, is under these circumstances, how can we develop our relationship?
Well, the United States seeks fair and reciprocal trade relationships. We want to treat our partner countries well, and we'd like those countries to treat us well in return. So in granting duty-free access to our market for goods, we'd like to have similar access to those markets. And so we have been in negotiations with countries where the market access has not been reciprocal, where we don't benefit mutually, and we'll continue to pursue free reciprocal trading relationships. We think at the end of the day that benefits all of us and in fact promotes free trade by ensuring that we all play by the same set of rules.
And we touched on the GSP as well. So recently, the US has threatened to cut off a GSP trade concession to India, which is our neighboring country, affecting over $5 billion of exports to the US. So Sri Lanka is also a GSP beneficiary. So tell us a little bit about your comments on this, Your Excellency.
Well, our relationship with Sri Lanka is separate from our relationship with India. So in fact, the trade negotiation between the United States and India has no bearing on the trading relationship here in Sri Lanka. And as noted earlier, with over 7,000 goods that can come from Sri Lanka and have duty-free entry to the market in the United States, we definitely think that there's room to expand that trade relationship. And we'd like to be able to promote that. We believe in a world where everybody has the opportunity to achieve a prosperous future, and we want to work together to get there. Clearly, making sure that we have strong trade relationships is part of making that happen.
It's clear that that's not going to affect us.
Oh, that's right. We want to make sure that the relationship here is strong, and we treat those relationships as separate as the countries are separate.
And Your Excellency, the US focuses on laying the foundation for the 21st century American diplomacy. So what is the position of Sri Lanka in this?
Well, I mentioned common interests that our countries share. I think we're concerned about security in the region. We also want to ensure that our democratic traditions remain strong and that our institutions remain strong. I think we also want to make sure that global security is well supported. And of course, in the 21st century, there is no issue that is truly local at the end of the day. Sri Lanka contributes troops to peacekeeping, for example, to help in faraway places, ensuring that trouble does not come here or to other countries. The United States tries hard to partner with countries to defeat terrorism, for example, and we work together to share information and build capacity. We also want to make sure that in the 21st century, we're all looking ahead at new innovation, the digital economy, for example. What can we do together to build strong relationships and take advantage of new ideas and new opportunities?
And there are three main issues in high political debate right now. One is about the Millennium Challenge Cooperation and the two military cooperation agreements, which is SOFA and AXA. So, Your Excellency, can you explain, or rather can you enlighten on these agreements in a layman's point of view so that people out there would understand?
Sure, I really welcome the chance to talk with your audience about these three agreements. The three agreements are separate, and I believe in the media there have been a number of people commenting and lumping them all together, but they're not the same. And I would note that, and take them one by one perhaps, that the AXA agreement, which is an existing agreement between our governments, is focused on providing goods and services between militaries. So for example, when Sri Lankan forces and U.S. forces train together, those sailors and soldiers need to eat and drink while they're conducting that training. The AXA agreement allows the U.S. military to pay for that food and drink, and in fact to buy that food and drink from local business people, from local suppliers. So when we do train together and we're buying that food and drink or other supplies, we're able to pay for those things locally, putting money into the Sri Lankan economy. Similarly, if Sri Lankan forces were in the United States, they would have the ability to do the same thing. The Visiting Forces Agreement is an update to an existing agreement, and it is designed to address a number of red tape issues. So, for example, in 2017, when there were terrible floods in this country, the government asked the United States to help. We brought in relief supplies. Those airplanes required clearances from the government. The air crew, of course, had to have some sort of visa or document to arrive. The Visiting Forces Agreement would allow us to discuss and agree in advance and how we'll handle all of those procedures.
So that they can come in smoothly.
That's right.
Exactly.
So when there's an emergency, we don't spend time trying to cut through red tape. We've already agreed on those procedures. I think there has been a misimpression made in the media that somehow it establishes conditions for a base. And I do want to say to the viewers, there is no intention, no plan for a United States base in Sri Lanka. What we would like to do is ensure that as we cooperate at the invitation of your government, training exercise, disaster response, that we have agreed in advance on the terms and conditions on how we will handle that. And so that's what the Visiting Forces Agreement addresses. The Millennium Challenge Corporation Compact is a completely separate issue. It's not about the military, it's not about security. It's actually about prosperity and poverty alleviation. It's an economic agreement that would allow the government of the United States, the American taxpayer, to provide $480 million to the government of Sri Lanka to deal with some of the key issues that prevent economic growth. So the compact is broken down into two areas. One is to support the transportation network, helping get goods and services to the port in Colombo faster, quicker, more cheaply, as well as helping to move people around, improving the bus system and other public transit. We would also provide some funding to improve roads. And I think this, as many people have traveled across the country, know the quality of roads is uneven and many need to be upgraded. Another component of the compact is to support the government of Sri Lanka's efforts at e-land registry. There's a digital registry of land. We would help the government implement its own efforts. All of these elements to the agreement have been identified as priorities by the government of Sri Lanka. The effort to work on the roads and implement e-land registry would be done by the government of Sri Lanka, and all the results of that are owned by the government of Sri Lanka. Again, a lot of misinformation out there suggesting the U.S. government is going to own land or have a corridor here in Sri Lanka. That is untrue. And I'm glad to have a chance to explain, because our interest in providing a gift from the American people to the people of Sri Lanka is in helping the economy here grow in a fair and inclusive way. I think that can make both of our countries more prosperous and get to that trade relationship we'd like to see enhanced.
And these are like burning questions in many people's heads right now. So they also say that U.S. wants bases here because it will lose Diego Garcia soon, and that negotiations to retain it is also currently on. So what are your comments on it?
Well, as I said earlier, the United States has no intention, no plan to build a military base in Sri Lanka. That is just not in the cards. It's not a plan. It's not part of our relationship. The issues with Diego Garcia are separate. I think what we ought to be focusing on here in the relationship are those common security interests that both of our countries have. And of course, what we would like to see is a very strong, capable, sovereign Sri Lanka, well able to defend its shores and patrol its waters, keep the oceans navigable, keep the airspace open so that all nations can transit. And everybody is following the rules and norms for the international order.
According to your calculations, Your Excellency, would it be possible to finalize SOFA before the 2019 presidential poll?
Well, the agreement renewal is in negotiation. I don't know how long that will take. We're not rushing things. This is something where both countries need to agree, and we want to make sure that there is full agreement. So I'm not going to predict when we might conclude those negotiations. I think we'll do so when we've reached full agreement.
And on this exclusive interview, we intend to clear a lot of doubts. So many here blame the US for pushing Sri Lanka to go ahead with Geneva recommendations in spite of US quitting the UN body. So can you explain US's stand on accountability issues?
Well, the government of Sri Lanka was a co-sponsor of the resolutions in the Human Rights Council. And the United States continues to support the government here in fulfilling its promises. So in that sense, we do want to support efforts, continued efforts, and efforts that are being productive to achieve greater reconciliation among communities in Sri Lanka and to ensure that there is truth-seeking, that conflict era past, that some of the gross violations of human rights, that those people who suffered on all sides of the conflict have an opportunity to learn the fate of loved ones or what happened during that time. We also think that accountability is important as a part of that process and want to ensure that rule of law in Sri Lanka is strong. That's an important pillar of any democracy, citizens knowing that they can receive fair and impartial justice. And so we'll continue to support not only the government's efforts, but civil society's efforts to achieve those three things.
Your Excellency, you touched on this previously, but I think it would be better if you could elaborate on this. The other two main allegations are that the US wants to establish an economic corridor in Sri Lanka that would provide more benefits to the US, and also about opening a branch of the US Bar Association here in Sri Lanka. So, Your Excellency, what do you have to say about these two allegations?
Well, there is no economic corridor. As I explained, the gift that the United States would give Sri Lanka to enhance the transportation network is to do segments of road maintenance and also to help with the transportation network, both the movement of goods and of people around Colombo. So there is no corridor. That is simply blatant misinformation, and I'm glad to have the chance to correct that for the audience. In terms of your other question about the American Bar Association opening a branch, as far as I know, that is also not true. The American Bar Association is a private professional association, and they do work and have affiliations with bar associations all around the world. As you can imagine, there are professional networks of lawyers. So I believe that also to be misinformation. I would suggest, though, that for Sri Lanka, being connected to colleagues worldwide, whether they're in the United States or United Kingdom or in India or Bangladesh, this is an important part of our universe today, where everything is global. And I think it's useful to be able to share experiences and information. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing if professional associations in Sri Lanka want to make connections with associations in other countries.
This is basically like sharing ideas and views and making connections.
Exactly. And sometimes helping to build capacity. Perhaps training is a part of that, or professional exchanges. So there are a lot of opportunities to learn from one another. And I think we realize this more and more in the 21st century. As more information is available, making sense of that, finding practical ways to apply that. But that's how we can work together better.
It's basically like getting international exposure and experience.
That's right. That's right.
And does the US have any political favorites in Sri Lanka?
No, we don't. Simple answer to that question. Of course, I know this is an election year, and I have arrived at a time of some very difficult politics, but we don't have a favorite. The people of Sri Lanka are going to choose their next government when the presidential and then parliamentary elections are held. What we would like to see is a process that is free and fair and open and follows the democratic norms in the Constitution of this country. As another constitutional democracy, we believe that's very important for the people, not just today, but in the future, to ensure that their government is well representing them. Now, the government that emerges from that process, we will find a way to work with whoever wins that vote.
So basically, there's no intention to intervene in local politics, as some say.
Exactly, no intention to intervene.
And it's all about building ties between the two countries. And right now we're discussing about bilateral relationship. Tourism plays a major role in this as well. So how do we intend to build on this?
Well, tourism, I think, is a hugely growing sector in the Sri Lankan economy. It's clearly suffered a shock in the wake of the terror attacks and had some challenges due to the constitutional crisis late last year. The United States has been supporting the Tourism Association, trying to help with some advertising and other campaigns to draw tourists to Sri Lanka. That's one way our government has been supporting the effort. But I'm also looking to the private sector to see opportunity here and to think about where they could be investing in Sri Lanka, working with partners. I think there are great potential also in more U.S. tourists coming, spending their money directly, here in hotels and restaurants. As Sri Lanka becomes a better known destination, I expect those tourist numbers to rise. And you might have noted recently that we reduced our travel advisory, urging our citizens, of course, to exercise caution, but lowering it from the levels that were in place immediately after the attack.
And that certainly would be great. And what about job opportunities for Sri Lankans abroad?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, there are many Sri Lankans who study in the United States. Some of them work in conjunction with that study. I think, frankly, though, there are so many opportunities here for well-qualified Sri Lankans that I'd like to see more people working here and looking for those opportunities, professional opportunities as well as blue-collar construction type work. I think the economy here is only going to be growing and there is a labor shortage.
So which kind of opens doors for Sri Lankans to travel to the US?
Well, certainly Sri Lankans can travel to the U.S. and I would like to see more Sri Lankans studying in the U.S. and coming back here and contributing to the country. I've met many alumni of U.S. universities and I think they've had good experiences, come back with really significant skills, and whether they were studying botany or they're studying political science or engineering or medicine, these are people who really are talented and bring something special back to their home country. And as the economy grows, there is going to be a place for these people here.
Exactly. And today we discussed a lot of burning questions, and I think many things are clear right now. So, Your Excellency, as of final, what's your message to the general public?
Well, I'm glad to have the opportunity, of course, to speak directly to people, and want to emphasize again that the United States hopes to continue that 70-year-long partnership with the people and the governments of Sri Lanka. A partnership is exactly that. It's a two-way street. It's reciprocal. We want to see a strong and sovereign Sri Lanka as a partner. We feel that that's the path to the future we're both hoping for. I think one that has qualities of peace and prosperity and liberty. These are values that we share in common, and we hope our partnership can generate that for both of our countries.
And with the two military agreements, this is just one more question before we wind up. What would happen to the neutrality of Sri Lanka?
Well, neither agreement impacts the neutrality of Sri Lanka. As I noted, the AXA is about being able to purchase goods and services, for example, when we're training or even conducting a humanitarian response, like to the tsunami or the floods. It's just an administrative agreement that allows us to pay for the goods and services that we use when we're here by invitation. The Visiting Forces Agreement also only governs those logistical arrangements when we're here by invitation of the government of Sri Lanka, when we train together, for example, or when there's disaster response. So neither commits the government of Sri Lanka to do anything that would impair its sovereignty. And of course, these agreements are mutually agreed. We don't compel the government to make any concessions that it does not want to make. We want to make sure that we're in full agreement on how to handle these administrative and bureaucratic procedures, save both of our sides some time. But we want to make sure that we're both clear about what those procedures will be.
Just one more, although I did say that the previous one was the final one, Your Excellency. Let's touch on the green card opportunity for the Sri Lankans.
So, of course, many Sri Lankans choose to emigrate to the United States, and the United States does, like all countries, have a set of laws that govern how that emigration can take place. Many Sri Lankans have traveled to the United States and have become green card holders, which is a permanent residency status. It's not citizenship, but sort of a step before that. That happens through family connections or sometimes it's investment or other work opportunities. So we have all of our visa information on our embassy website. People can take a look at that. Of course, we love to have and welcome new U.S. citizens to the United States. But we also hope that we can maintain that two-way connectivity, that many Sri Lankans who come to the U.S. also are going to return home and help the country here prosper. Maintain their ties, perhaps, but help the country and the economy here grow.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for being a part of the program. It was a great honor having you here with us.
Sharifa, thanks so much.
Thank you. And with that, we conclude our exclusive interview with Her Excellency Alaina Teplitz, the Ambassador of the United States of America to Sri Lanka and the Maldives.